Well, hello, and happy Tuesday to you. So wonder, actually, wait, hold on. It is Wednesday. I apologize. It's been one of those weeks, but for those of you who are brand new to the show, welcome to the show. Welcome to today's live level up conversation. Whether you're joining me live or catching me on replay, it is in fact Wednesday, and it's wonderful to be diving in right with you. Let's get started.
Welcome to Level Up with Winnie Sun. Award-winning financial pro. Get ready. Level Up with Winnie Sun.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the show. I'm Winnie, your host and award winning financial pro, a Forbes contributor, and a CNBC council member and contributor. And yeah, we're streaming here live on a whole bunch of social media platforms. So thanks so much for making the time and joining me today. So let's jump in because there's a lot to talk about. Well, as you know, the market has currently already closed. The Dow closed down 10 points today. NASDAQ up 190 points, and the S&P 500 also in the positive, ending up 29 points. It's one of those not too great, not too bad days. So it's kind of in the middle. And there's been a lot of news that I want to share with you. So bear with me because we are going to talk about what's happening coming out from Washington, D.C. In fact, President Trump has made a big announcement today. This is being reported by CNBC and also Yahoo Finance. Multiple financial publications are talking about what's happened in the world of tariffs and specifically with the country of Vietnam. Now, President Trump has struck a deal with Vietnam, reducing tariffs to just 20% on imports and 40% on transshipped goods, while U.S. exports to Vietnam will face zero tariffs. Yeah, you heard that right. Now, of course, we know that there's been a big deadline coming up just next week, and that is July 9th, talking about whether some of the tariffs that have been on pause, if those pauses will continue, or if things are going to go back to how they were previously discussed. Now, President Trump has threatened higher tariffs on holdout countries such as Japan, which is, of course, causing a lot of pressure to them to finalize these trade deals. Otherwise, he says that they could also face very steep penalties upwards to 35% in terms of tariffs. Now, countries such as Italy do fear significant export and job losses. And of course, Japan's automakers are having to absorb tariff costs to protect their market share here in the United States as well. Now, the European Union, meanwhile, is also pushing for broad tariff reductions. As we know, talks are continue to take place. But that's what we know so far. But of course, we'll have to see how that continues. But what that really means for you is that you can probably expect possible price increases on imported goods, whether that be like toys or clothes, cars, electronics. We know that a lot of these things are probably positioned to be more expensive if they're made offshore. Also, we're talking about job security may also weaken in sort of these affected industries ahead as well. So whatever you do, make sure to plan ahead. Like if you need to buy certain things, you might want to do so early. And of course, diversify your income if you can to help offset any uncertainty. Now let's continue because I also want to talk about the US dollar. Now, when the US dollar is strong and you travel abroad and you go vacation, that's a beautiful thing because your dollar can buy a lot more goods in a foreign country. Well, unfortunately, the dollar has now had the worst first half of the year since 1973. And much of that is impacted by things such as tariff uncertainty and global doubts. In fact, this is being reported by the New York Times that the US dollar has dropped over 10% in 2025. Now, this, of course, is the worst first half performance since I said 1973, and it's triggered mostly by President Trump's unexpected tariffs. I don't know if that's really unexpected because I do think he's talked about that even when he was running for presidency. But of course, there have been rising concerns about the US debt and global reliability. And of course, this big, beautiful bill, or call it what you will, that is sort of in limbo right now, and then expected to possibly pass or fail the House vote this week. We don't know. We'll definitely report back as we know more. But of course, tariff driven inflation and economic instability is really shaking investor confidence, and it's weakening the dollar's global role, despite, of course, the stock market being not that bad. Now, initially, um, the dollar actually improved, but now has been sliding as the stock market is fearing prolonged inflation, higher interest rates, and of course, what's happening up in Wall Street and whether that's going to improve, and being some of the news that we haven't heard completely from the White House as well. Now, we know that a lot of foreign investors are also pulling back from investments in the United States, such as with US bonds and equities. And let's be honest, I think a lot more foreigners are no longer coming to the United States as they were previously, given some of the immigration concerns that we've been seeing here in the United States as well. So let's continue though, because we want to talk about also what's another area that's sort of been suffering, and that is the US private sector. Now, this is being reported by CNBC. And I want to talk about jobs for a minute because ADP has recently shared a report which actually showed a surprising loss of 33,000 private sector jobs in the month of June. Like, we're in July now, it's like literally a week ago, defying forecasts of over 100,000 job gain. That's what they were expecting. That certainly wasn't the case. This is actually the first decline since March of 2023. Now, many economists are noting that employers now are showing reluctance to hire or replace workers, which is signaling caution and concern about the US economy. Now, the biggest losses have occurred in professional and business services, about 56,000, and health and education, about 52,000, which is dragging down overall job numbers. Now, there's some good news, though. Industries such as manufacturing and mining, now they've been adding jobs, about 32,000, partially offsetting the broader losses in business services. But fewer than 20 employees shed 29,000 jobs. So firms that had less than 20 employees, that was a pretty significant amount of 29,000 jobs. So a lot of small businesses are hurting. Large businesses with over 500 workers added 30,000 roles. But as we know from this week alone, we've been hearing a lot of tech companies continue to do layoffs. I believe Microsoft was one of them this week. So as we see more news coming out from tariffs, from artificial intelligence and everything else, I think we're going to continue to see some pressure in the job market. Now, speaking of the job market, I think this is an area that we should really make sure is on our radar. And I see Sadiq joining us on YouTube Live. Sadiq, thank you so much for being here. And Joshua on YouTube Live, thank you so much for both of you for being here. Always a treat to have you and appreciate your making the time. We want to talk about what's going on at Amazon. Now, this is being reported by the Wall Street Journal. Well, at Amazon, get this, they have now brought in over 1 million robots they're deploying in their warehouses. But this is what's really interesting. This is nearing the number of human employees that they have, which stands at about 1.56 million employees. And in fact, 75% of Amazon's global deliveries now are assisted by robots, which just reflects like the growing trend of automation and how it's reshaping the Amazon fulfillment network. So the next time you get a package delivered to your front door, just know, probably some robots had their paws all over that box at some point. In fact, the average number of workers per Amazon facility has dropped to about 670 in 2024, which is the lowest level that they've had in 16 years. So they are definitely going all in robotics. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy has confirmed that more job cuts are expected with AI expansion. So, the ADP number that we were just talking about, how, more people have been losing jobs in the private sector. Well, CEOs haven't been shy about letting you know now that this is going to probably be happening. They're probably going to be letting go more employees and bringing in more robotics, more artificial intelligence, other ways to do what they need to do, conduct business in a cheaper, more efficient fashion, unfortunately at the cost of human jobs, which, as you know, is not a good thing because we rely on income to survive, to support our families, to save for retirement and all that. What does that mean for people who are out of work? What are they going to do? Now, for regular people, of course, what does this mean, right? Regular people like you and I, well, it does mean that, like, faster and potentially cheaper deliveries. Automation will increase efficiency, but it also means that many of us will then lose jobs, whether it be the warehouse or in the corporate office, because now, and especially in areas of entry level positions, because this could, in fact, impact local economies. You know how a lot of different local economies are excited when a company such as Amazon comes and builds a very large, warehouse or facilities. They're thinking new jobs. But what if you are building more facilities and it's not for new human jobs, but that some of the human jobs will be replaced by robotics? How do you feel about that at that point? Now, of course, there'll be more and more pressure on many retailers to automate, right? To save costs, to create more like investor value, reshaping the entire logistics and retail labor market as it is. So definitely something to pay attention to for all of you, and especially for those of you who think that your job could be replaced by artificial intelligence sooner rather than later. Make sure to have another plan. Look at other ways, other industries that your your talent and where you might be needed, and definitely try to move in that direction sooner rather than later. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to wait to a point where, like right now, robots are taking over almost 50% of the jobs, in these warehouses. Well, if I was working at one of these Amazon warehouses, I don't know about you, I'd be concerned. And I would look for other areas that I think that I could provide value and I could get paid for my time. So, something to think about. And speaking of things to think about, let's talk about the students and what they're thinking about at a college, in particular, Columbia. Columbia University, big news coming out of the New York Times. Columbia University has agreed to pay a whopping $9 million to settle a lawsuit from former students who claim that they were overcharged due to the school submitting false data to US News and World Report to boost its college rating. This is huge, right? Because so many people who are looking to go to college, thinking about what schools they want to apply for, submitting their application fees to, well, they often turn to the US News and Report ranking to see which colleges reign supreme and which colleges they might want to apply to. Well, the scandal erupted in 2022 after Columbia actually ranked number 2 nationally, but a university mathematician actually exposed discrepancies, which led to dropping to number 18, and Columbia's later exit from the rankings altogether. Now, of course, this lawsuit covered about 22,000 students from the year of 2016 to 2022. Now, if all apply, each would receive run for this lawsuit. If all of these 22,000 students apply for some financial means for this lawsuit, it would roughly mean about $273 per student after legal fees, but not a good look. And I'm sure that those who then attended Columbia, maybe they're really happy. Like, this was the best college for me anyway, even if they were ranked number 18. But what if, just what if they turned down a number 3 or 4 or 5 school because they thought Columbia was ranked 2, or they turned down a number 15 school, right? So allegedly, this falsified data include claims that 83% of classes had fewer than 20 students. Well, that's something you definitely don't want to lie about, with significant influence to rankings. Let's be honest, right? A lot of students don't do well or enjoy really, really large classroom sizes. They like to have that smaller classroom experience, more interaction with their professors or TAs. Now, Columbia, in this case, admitted no wrongdoing. They said that they deeply regret any discrepancies in the data. They've, of course, since improved their data reporting process. But the mathematician behind the expose called the settlement just a gratifying acknowledgement of misconduct and, of course, false data. So this case really sort of raises and opens my eyes to the broader questions about the reliability of college rankings. Like, how accurate is this? In fact, I saw someone on social media saying like you can't even trust some of the AI produce results because, again, do you trust the source of the data? Or like, one of the comments was like, do you trust the tech bros? And I'm like, I don't know. But I think we have to trust that the data going in is accurate and correct in order for the results coming out to give you something that is trustworthy. I'm sure US News felt that the data that they received was reasonable. Otherwise, they wouldn't have published it. But nonetheless, the settlement still has to be approved by a judge. But Columbia said that it's settled to just avoid lengthy and costly litigation. Because let's be honest, with all of the things going on with Columbia University and Harvard University and the Trump administration, I'm thinking they have their hands full, and this might just have been an easier, less painful route to take. Yeah. ICCG talking about going to a MIA one warehouse. Okay, well, let's continue. I want to talk about a store that maybe you had no idea, maybe this wasn't even on your radar, but you know what? It makes for maybe a good July 4th discussion if you're going to be seeing some friends or family members. Well, Costco, and Costco is very popular and very much in many cases something that many families love to go to save money. Well, they're getting sued. And this is being reported by the New York Times. They're being sued by the one and only Lululemon. Lululemon, as you know, is also a very popular sort of active wear company, and you're seen as a very premium product. Well, Lululemon is suing Costco because they're accusing the wholesaler giant of selling copycat versions of their very popular scuba hoodies, Define jackets, and ABC's men's pants. In fact, the lawsuit highlights that Costco used not only similar products like their hoodies and their pants, but they even used Lululemon style marketing terms, such as describing a similar colored pullover with actually the same name, Tide Water Teal. Eesh. That's not a good look, right? Well, Costco allegedly sold these Lululemon style pants for just under $20 under their Kirkland brand, compared to Lululemon's $130 originals. That's right. That's a big difference. Now, Lululemon claims that these actions exploit its brand equity and hurt its reputation. And of course, they were saying people even thought that perhaps Lululemon was selling their pants at a discount at Costco, and people were talking about whether or not they were doing this. Maybe it was a white label deal, but this case sort of underscores how hard it is to protect clothing designs here in the United States, where fashion law is weaker than in places such as Europe. Now, Lululemon has, of course, tackled dupes before, like hosting dupe swaps where customers traded fake leggings for authentic ones. But this lawsuit is sort of mirroring a growing trend of designers fighting back against dupe culture, which they said has just exploded on platforms such as TikTok and Instagram, with billions of people and billions of views seeing these dupes, if you will. And let's be honest, like, everybody likes a good deal, everybody likes a bargain. But in this case, if Lululemon wins, it could completely reshape the dupe landscape, which signals sort of a cultural shift back to valuing original products over cheap lookalikes. So I'm just curious to see how you feel about that. Do you think like that's a good idea, or not a good idea? Do you think it's fair or not fair? You'll have to be the judge of that. And of course, the best way that you can be a judge of that is, of course, deciding where you spend your dollars. All right, let's continue and talk about what's coming up this week and why it kind of threw off my week this week. I was actually thinking, is it today? Today? Is it Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? Because I was just talking to a colleague about the July 4th weekend. Well, the July 4th weekend, my friends, is in fact Friday. But here's what I want to share with you. This is coming from NPR talking about travel. Now, many of you may be like flying, maybe going somewhere fun. Maybe you're staying home, or maybe you're like the whopping amount of people doing a road trip. This is being shared on NPR, talking about over 72 million Americans are expected to travel to 50 plus miles between June 28th, a couple days ago, and July 6th. In fact, 1.7 million are expected to travel more than even last year, with July 4th in this case falling on a Friday. And that makes perfect sense, right? I mean, it's not in the middle of the week, so there's more of an excuse. You get a 3-day week and let's go. Well, they're saying that, well, currently, of course, road trips are going to be dominating. Nearly 62 million of us are expected to drive, and they're expecting that the heaviest traffic is going to be between, of course, July 2nd and July 6th, especially in the afternoon. So they said the best time to drive is going to be before 12 noon on weekdays and before 11 a.m. on weekends. Now, I will say that in my experiences, if you can get out of the house before 7 a.m., you'll be a much happier camper, and it just seems to be a lot less painful to wherever you're driving to. Now, to avoid common issues, AAA is also recommending that you check your tires, make sure they're not flat. They're recommending that you check your batteries, make sure you're good. Make sure you bring your jumper cables and bring snacks, water, flashlight, things like that. And don't forget, really important, don't forget your first aid kit. And also, I would also recommend bringing some non-perishable snacks. You just don't know. And it's just good to have like a plan B. In fact, one thing that my husband likes to do when we're going on a long road trip, he actually will take the car in and just do like some really minor check, and have the person check his car, make sure there's anything that needs to be topped off or whatnot, just in case, right? Especially when you're doing a long drive. But TSA expecting over 18.5 million flyers this week. And of course, July 6th, like we talked about, is expected to be the busiest day at about 2.9 million travelers because, of course, people need to get back home, maybe to work or whatever. But so if you're going to go to the airport, they're recommending to, especially during the July 4th week now, is to make sure that you arrive at least 2 hours early. And if you can, travel before 9 a.m. just to reduce delay risk. And that's something that I really think is smart. If you can, and I got this travel tip from one of my dear friends, um, from Bougie Miles, Bethany Walsh. If you don't follow her, definitely a smart follow. But she's always recommended to fly the earlier flight of each day if you can. And the reason that is because if there's flight delays or your flight gets canceled, or I don't know, you get to the airport late, at least there's other flights, hopefully, that are later in the day that you could potentially jump onto. So you're just not stuck at the airport. So something to think about. But nonetheless, there's still some last minute. If you're a last minute person, you haven't made plans yet. I mean, there's still a lot of places that you can go, even locally, and you can probably check out hotel deals for last minute deals too. But whatever you do, I'm hoping that you have a beautiful July 4th weekend. Of course, I'll be coming back to you again next week. But nonetheless, lots of things to talk about and a lot of changes. And I'm hoping to be able to talk to you about this big, beautiful act very soon. I know some people, they're calling it the big beautiful act. I will say that I think there's parts of it that are beautiful, but I also think there's parts of it that are really just downright ugly. And so I'm going to share some of that with you in the coming days here. But regardless, I hope that you have a beautiful day and you do well today and you get some rest over the long weekend. And with that, I'll see you again very much next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. The market has closed, so we don't need to check up on those numbers. For those of you who are with me live, thank you so much for making the time. And if you want to watch past full episodes of Level Up Live, you can always check out NASDAQ, Amazon Fire, Roku, and many other streaming platforms as well. And with that, if you share this episode online with your friends, definitely tag at Winnie Sun so I can see that. And speaking of which, I did prepare a very long thread on X, previously known as Twitter, on the things that you really should have on your radar regarding the big, beautiful act that could impact you financially in terms of your retirement savings, education savings for your family, and even your elderly senior family members as well. So definitely check that out. I try to be as comprehensive as I could with the information that we have so far, and I'll continue to update as well. But definitely take a look at that. 20 things. I think if you read each of those, I think it's definitely going to raise some eyebrows on just what sort of things you should be preparing for and what things you can plan for to just make sure that you're going to be good not only this year, but next year as well. So really big. With that, thank you so much, my friends. Hope that you have a wonderful day. I'll see you very soon. Take care now. Bye bye.